To join the show, email The Sit Down at mpbonline.org or send us a voice note with the Talk to Us feature inside the MPB Public Media app. This is MPB Think Radio.
Let's go. You found the Sit Down with Russ Latino, where we explore the people and ideas that are shaping Mississippi's future and talk a little bit about the things that make our state a great place to call home. I'm your host, Russ Latino, in the booth, Java Chapman today. We're thrilled to have you along for the ride of our maiden voyage of this show and look forward to learning together, having some real conversations that matter, and hopefully having a little fun right here on MPB Think Radio. You'll be able to catch us weekly on Wednesdays at 10 a.m., or you can download today's episode anytime, wherever you are using your favorite podcast app, whether that's Apple or Spotify. And while Mama always told me I had a face for radio, you can also watch us live on video through live stream on YouTube today. Our very first guest is the husband of Ely, the dad of 3 daughters, and the governor of the great state of Mississippi, Tate Reeves. Governor, thank you for being here to kick off the first episode of the Sit Down.
Well, thanks for inviting me on, Russ. What a great opportunity this is, and I hope throughout your tenure on radio you have a lot of fun. Not just a little bit of fun, but a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to it, and this is a great way to start. You know, I definitely want to dig into some of the deeper issues that are facing the state, the challenges that we have, the opportunities that we have, the success we've had, because there is real success there to talk about. But I've been thinking about something lately. You know, I've been around politics since I was a young teenager. And in some ways, that was an anomaly because my family really wasn't political at all. But in that time, I've known a lot of elected officials, but I've really known them from a policy standpoint. What are they for? What are they against? And not necessarily from a human standpoint. And so one of the things we want to do with this show is not only dig into the weeds of the issues that impact Mississippians, but also to take a pause and maybe try to understand where leaders are coming from, what shaped their worldview, why they tick the way that they tick. And so you're going to be a guinea pig for that in a way today. And I appreciate you being a good sport there. Talk a little bit. You grew up in Rankin County, right?
I did. So I grew up in Florence, Mississippi, went to Florence High School at a time when Florence wasn't nearly as big as it is today. We were a 3A school. But it was a great school. I was very blessed to get a fantastic education, both at home and at school. And that's something that I am very, very thankful for. My mom and dad are both graduates of Bogachita High School down in Lincoln County. And so, you know, everything that comes along with living in a small town and the values that those represent, that's what my parents learned from their parents, and, of course, what I learned from mine. And so a great little community, grew up playing every sport possible. Wasn't very good at any of them, but certainly enjoyed doing it and learned a lot of life's lessons along the way.
Now, you say you weren't very good at any of them, but I know that you played basketball at Millsaps, so you had to at least be good enough to play college basketball.
Well, I put a lot of time and effort into it. I'm reminded of a story that my dad used to tell me all the time. You know, my dad was one of 11. He had 5 brothers and 5 sisters that grew up in a 2-room house in Bogachita, Mississippi. He got the opportunity to go to Colin. And he got that opportunity because he got a half scholarship in football and a half scholarship in basketball. And when I was growing up, I always asked him, I said, well, wow, Dad, that's kind of impressive. What did that mean? He said, what it really meant was I wasn't very good in either one of them. But the reality is that gave him the opportunity to get higher education. He then put himself through Mississippi College. But the reality is I did get an opportunity to play basketball at Millsaps, met many great friends along the way, learned a little bit about competition, learned a little bit about winning, learned a little bit about losing, and I think that's something that is a very important life lesson. I think sports plays a significant role in many lives throughout, particularly the southeast part of our country, and most of the lessons learned are important. I think back to that first summer of 2020, I had been governor for less than 6 months, and and I was the first governor, and I think in America, that came out and said, I don't know exactly how this is going to work, but we're going to play college football and we're going to play high school football in Mississippi, and we're just going to figure out how to do it. And it's because for so many young people across the country, but specifically in our state, that is a piece of their education and their learning environment that's critically important to them being successful in life. And it certainly was critically important to whatever successes I've had is learning those lessons in between the lines on the basketball court or the soccer field or the football field or the baseball field, et cetera.
So if we can back up a bit, 7-year-old Tate Reeves riding his bike around Florence, Mississippi. What are you dreaming about becoming when you were a kid? What did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
NBA basketball player. I was absolutely convinced. I realized the the silliness of that as I think about it. But I spent a lot of my time when I was growing up in the backyard shooting basketball. A lot of my time, and I loved. It was back in those days when it was the Lakers versus the Celtics in the NBA championships. It was as I got further along in high school, it was the emergence of Michael Jordan. It was the 1983 NC State Wolfpack winning the Cardiac Kids winning the national championship. And you think about each of those, and it was just a really fun time. Of course, I was playing other sports as well, but I really did make the decision that I would focus on basketball late in my high school career, and quite frankly, it got me the opportunity to attend Millsaps College. I got to play basketball there, but I tell people all the time, I went to Millsaps really to play basketball, and I just lucked into a great education and learned the most important thing that you can learn in education, and that is not what to think, but how to think. And I think that was a piece of my background and my educational attainment that really has helped me in certainly the career that I've chosen. Is you've got to be willing and able to listen to different voices and different viewpoints, and then also you've got to be committed to, once you figure out what your position is on something, that you want to fight for it, and you want to make sure that if you are convinced that it's the right thing to do for the people who elected you, that you do everything you can to hold your ground, if you will.
So talk a little bit about, you mentioned your parents a few times when we first started the conversation. What are the lessons that they ingrained in you that have stuck and maybe that impact the way that you govern?
Well, I think most of all, hard work certainly comes to mind. I mean, my dad particularly embodies the American dream. He grew up again, as I mentioned earlier, in a small house down in Bogachita, went to a high school that probably he had 25 or 30 kids in his graduating class, and just really through hard work and sheer determination, started a small business almost 50 years ago and continues to run that business to this day. And so for me, what I learned more than anything else is truly that the American dream is real, and no matter where you come from or what you have or don't have growing up, that you have the opportunity and the ability to succeed in life, that's one thing that America gives our people. And look, there's no doubt that it is harder for some people than it is for others. There are some people that start out in a different position, and that's just the way of the world. But in America, if you have a desire and you are willing to work hard, then you have the ability to accomplish really whatever you're bold enough to dream. And that's one of the things that I tell kids all the time when I travel around the state and speak to young people. You've got to be able to, number one, dream big. You've got to be able to, number two, once you have those dreams, you got to be competent and smart enough to sit down and develop a plan to accomplish those dreams. And then thirdly, you just got to be willing to work hard. And more than anything else, that's what my parents pounded in my head. And obviously, you get to a level, for me, it was D3 basketball, where you realize there are a lot of other good players out there too, and that sometimes you don't accomplish every dream that you want to accomplish, but that doesn't mean that the journey wasn't worth it. And I think more than anything else, it's that opportunity for success that we have in Mississippi and that we have in the United States of America that really drives me every day is, we've got to continue to create opportunities for people across the state, and I think understanding and having a philosophical viewpoint of what role government plays, and more importantly, what role it shouldn't play, is something that I learned at a young age, and continue to learn from and utilize in my current job.
Did you meet Ely at Millsaps?
I did.
So that's also an important thing that happened at Millsaps.
The most important thing in my life at Millsaps. I'm 1 year older than her, and so I met her the summer before her freshman year at Millsaps, and we were friends, and for a long time we worked together for a little bit after we both graduated, and we have been married now since 2001. So for just shy of 24 years, our anniversary is coming up. 23 years, our anniversary is coming up. And but no, we've been very, very blessed with 3 young daughters, all of whom are exceptionally talented in their own ways. And we're excited to see what the future holds for them.
And you've got one that just got a scholarship. Is it at UT Chattanooga to play soccer?
I do. My oldest is a sophomore in college here in the state of Mississippi. My middle daughter is a senior in high school that is a commit to the UT Chat to play women's soccer. And then I have a 7th grader as well. So it's a busy and active time. I tell folks all the time. I actually just told someone earlier here in the building that I really do 2 things in life right now. I work and I watch my kids play sports, but not necessarily in that order.
So you said growing up you wanted to be a basketball player. Then I can safely assume that young Tate Reeves wasn't thinking, at 29 years old, I'm going to be the treasurer of the state of Mississippi.
That surprised me and Ely and everyone near me. Growing up, my father was never ran for anything, but he was always supportive of people in the community that were making the community better. And so I did learn that from him. But the reality is that when I went to Millsaps, I was a freshman in the fall of 1992. You may recall that was the year in which George H.W. Bush was running for re-election, and Bill Clinton, the then governor of Arkansas, was running against him. And then they had a third-party candidate in Ross Perot, which took a pretty significant chunk of the vote that year. And so I became a member of the Young Republicans there at Millsaps. It was a small group when we started. We grew it a little bit, but had the opportunity to have a lot of my friends get a little bit involved in the political process just through volunteering, what college kids do, and what we know a bunch of college kids all around the country are doing right now in this presidential election year. And I enjoyed it. And so I continue to meander throughout the world of politics and working in politics. And at that time, the money was nowhere near where it is today. There's a lot of money in politics today. There was not back then. And so I ended up going into the world of finance. I was an economics major at Millsaps, and I went into the world of finance, worked here in central Mississippi, and then through acquisitions, spent some time in Nashville and Birmingham a little bit, and just had a really good opportunity. And then when 2003 came around, Mississippi was in a really bad position financially, the worst financial position we ever been in. Had about a $720 million budget shortfall on what then was a $3.6 billion budget, almost 25% out of whack. That's crazy. And was fortunate, and I'd been married for about a year and a half, and didn't have any kids at the time, and was in a position where I could make that decision to run for office, and never had any idea or any real thoughts of what was next. And here we are 22 years later.
So you were elected treasurer twice, lieutenant governor twice. Now you've been elected governor twice. Do you ever stop and think to yourself, what in the world was I thinking?
I tell everyone, Ely and I went from a 2-income family to a 0-income family to run for treasurer. That should have, in and of itself, disqualified us from the office of Chief Financial Officer of the state. But it's been a wild ride.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're talking with Governor Tate Reeves. After the break, we'll dig into the issues that are facing Mississippians. Be right back.
Thanks to our sustaining members who provide ongoing monthly financial support. You can become a sustainer too. Go to mpbonline.org and click Donate Now at the top of the page.
Wednesdays on MPB Think Radio help solve your problems. The original Southern Remedy covers all types of medical issues that affect your life at 11 a.m. If you can't stay with us for the rest of the morning, find our podcasts. They're on the MPB Public Radio app and on the MPB Think Radio YouTube channel.
Our local shows continue after the Sit Down with Russ Latino. Continue to listen to MPB Think Radio.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino on MPB Think Radio. To join the show, email thesitdown@mpbonline.org or send us a voice note with the Talk to Us feature inside the MPB Public Media app. This is MPB Think Radio.
Welcome back to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We're kicking off today's show, the very first episode, with a great guest. Governor Tate Reeves has been kind enough to join us in studio. We talked a little bit about the lead up to you being in office. Let's get to brass tacks and talk a little bit about the issues that are facing Mississippians. Kirk Fordyce used to say, only positive Mississippi spoken here. And for the longest time, that bothered me a little bit, if I'm honest, because obviously we have challenges. We need to acknowledge those. We need to fix those things, address them. But the flip side is also true, is that there's a group of folks, from my vantage point, that only focus on the negative things that are happening in Mississippi and refuse to recognize the positive. And I think either end of that continuum is probably a dishonest continuum, right? We need to be able to acknowledge challenges, but at the same time acknowledge success that we've had. So I say that as a lead up to asking you what I think will be an easy question, which is, in the last 5 years as governor, and maybe even before that, what are the things that you're proud of when you look at what the state of Mississippi has accomplished?
Well, and what I will first do is just agree with you. I do think that there is a large segment of the population that only wants to focus on the negative. And I tell our team all the time that if we don't tell our story, someone else is going to tell it for us. And if they tell it for us, they're not going to tell the whole truth. That's just the reality of where we find ourselves in American politics today. And I think that's true from a political standpoint, but I also think it's true from a state standpoint. And while there are certainly challenges that we have to deal with, and we need to acknowledge those, and that's one of the things that I've tried to do over the last 13 years as I've been very engaged in public policy decisions of the state, is let's acknowledge where there are challenges, but let's try to fix those. And you can't fix something if you can't acknowledge it. And so let's acknowledge where there are challenges, but let's also be realistic about what those challenges mean and what they mean to everyday Mississippians. I will tell you, of all the challenges we have in our state, and there are many, most of them can be fixed by everyone in our state who wants a good paying job to have the skills necessary to get a good paying job and allow them to provide for their families. And that's really been where our focus has been. When I ran in 2003, it seemed like since the beginning of time, since the beginning of our state, that Mississippi's unemployment rate had been, and this is a prime example of what you mentioned earlier, our unemployment rate had always historically been 150 basis points to 250 basis points above the national average. So if the unemployment rate nationally was 6%, Mississippi's was 7.5% to 8.5% forever. Well, now it's exactly the opposite. Mississippi's unemployment rate today is actually 150 basis points below the national average. Nationally, our unemployment rate's 4.3%. The unemployment rate in Mississippi is below 3%. So we have the lowest unemployment rate in state history. We have more people working today than at any time in state history, and that's something I'm very proud of. And that's something that I think we should all be proud of, because it's not any one policy that's led us to this. It's a combination of things. And I think that if you want a job in Mississippi, you have the opportunity today to either go get a job or to go learn skills to upsize your quality of skills that you offer to an employer so that you can get a job in the future. And I think that's incredibly important and something that I'm incredibly proud of. And it's taken a lot of time, but it literally means tens of thousands of Mississippians are working today that 10, 15, 20 years ago probably wouldn't have been. And that means 10 to 15 to 20,000 Mississippians. And in some instances, if you look at the bottom of our employment numbers during COVID, hundreds of thousands of Mississippians working today that weren't 3 or 4 years ago. So it's something that I think we should all celebrate. We should recognize what's gotten us to this point, and we should also strive to continue to grow the number of employed people in our state.
You know, it's interesting because I'm a policy nerd, so I like to dig into numbers. And the IRS does this thing where they look at tax returns migrating in and out of states. And one of the really interesting things to me is that if you look at tax returns of people who are migrating into the state of Mississippi that are making over $200,000, we actually rank 22nd in the country over the last year in terms of net migration of people that have salaries or incomes over $200,000. So that suggests that capital is coming to Mississippi. Are you seeing that in the conversations that you have with economic developers?
Well, I think what you've seen, particularly over the last 5 years, is the new entities that are coming here. The companies are creating jobs unlike what our economy has had in the past. You know, you look at companies like Amplify, for instance, which is a company that is currently in construction in Marshall County to build an EV battery manufacturing facility. They're going to hire 2,000 people, and those 2,000 people are going to earn over $60,000 a year on average. And so, again, that's 25% above about 20% above our average of wages across the state. And those are the kind of jobs that are being created here. Companies are now coming to Mississippi not just because we have a lot of good people with a strong work ethic. They're coming here now because our educational achievement levels are significantly improved, and we got a lot of people that are talented and can do those jobs, not at the jobs of the last 50 years, but the jobs of the next 50 years. And oh, by the way, when these companies come, they're major executives that move in, and we need more people in Mississippi making over $200,000 a year. Those are the folks that are future entrepreneurs. There are people who have the resources to go out and start a small business, and regardless of the number of companies that we announce moving from out of state into state, which is always good, the core of Mississippi's economy is always going to be small businesses and the people they employ. And so, but what you want is more people moving here with resources that can create that entrepreneurship and create more and more small businesses to go along with the larger employers.
So one of the things that I know that you've obviously talked about a lot is the progress that's made around economic development. You look at something like Amazon and the investment that they're making in 2 locations in Madison County and Hinds County, huge investments, right? From a company that is globally recognized as a top 5 company in the world, right? So that sort of thing obviously changes perception of Mississippi. I'm curious, when you guys are having conversations with companies like Amazon, what is the story that you're telling that attracts a company like that to say, we want to make a $10 billion investment?
Well, look, Mississippi is the best kept secret in the world. Now, I will tell you, and I laugh about this, but it's true, a whole bunch of my constituents want it to stay that way. That we have those of us that grew up in small towns are real proud of where we grew up, and we like that small town atmosphere, and we don't necessarily want a lot of additional growth of individuals, and I understand that. But Mississippi's the best kept secret in the world because of a lot of reasons, not the least of which is our affordability. The fact is it doesn't cost as much to live in Mississippi as it costs to live in New York City or in California. And so when that individual that you talked about earlier that's making $200,000 a year, or if they're making $60,000 a year, their quality of life here, their dollar goes further. And so their quality of life here is better. If you like the outdoors, there's no better place in the world to live than here in Mississippi, because we have the beaches in the south. We have hunting and fishing situated everywhere throughout the state, and so there's a lot of opportunities here. The pitch that we give often is it's the best kept secret in the world, and here's why. And you can literally go through the fact that, and this is what companies tend to look for. We have an educated workforce right now. If you look at fourth grade reading and fourth grade math, we have the smartest fourth graders in the entire southeastern United States. Well, if you have the smartest fourth graders in the southeastern United States today, that means in 10 years you're going to have the smartest workforce in the entire southeast United States. So there is reason to invest now to take advantage of that educational attainment growth that we're seeing really in every region of our state. Not only that, we have readily available sites. We made a decision when I became governor to work with the legislative leadership to understand that there aren't sites situated anywhere in America where there are enough locations for new businesses to locate. And it takes a lot of time to get the infrastructure around those kind of large sites. And so we spent a lot of time and effort and resources getting that infrastructure in place so that if a company wants to build them, and their single most important issue, and for many of them it is today, is speed to market. Well, what would have taken them 2 years to get a site ready to start building on, we've already done all that legwork for them, and it's investing in things that is a proper role of government, which is utilities and roads and bridges and other infrastructure. And so, and then finally, I think a major reason for our success is we showed during the pandemic that while folks in other states and other parts of the country maybe didn't go to work for a week or a month or a year in some instances, our people showed up, and we had to adjust the way in which we do it. But I think that showed a lot of corporate leaders around the country and around the globe that, hey, I want people like that working for me. And so, and oh, by the way, we've also shown a willingness to invest in our people through not only the kindergarten through 12th grade opportunities, but also in terms of workforce development, workforce training. And we have centralized that, and with our state workforce investment board, with Accelerate Mississippi, and we now have a coordinated approach. And it's not perfect, and we have more work to do. I want to be clear about that. But we definitely have everyone pulling in the same direction when it comes to making sure that our people have the skills that they need to do these jobs that are paying $60,000 and $70,000 and $80,000 a year, rather than just having the skills to be able to do the $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 a year jobs.
And I'm glad that you mentioned education, and we'll hop to a break here. But one of the things that I noticed actually driving in today on Twitter, there was somebody saying, I'm fed up with Mississippi being 50th in education. And it's like Annie E. Casey rates us 30th in education. So in the course of 20 years, we've actually been climbing the ranks. People just don't realize it. You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're talking with Governor Tate Reeves. When we come back, we'll stop looking backwards and start looking forwards, talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities facing the state of Mississippi.
I'm Dr. Jimmy Stewart, host of the original Southern Remedy, the show where I answer your medical questions. Subscribe to the podcast by searching for Southern Remedy on any podcasting app.
If you love MPB, wouldn't you love to work here? We're a lot more than radio voices. We're looking for teachers and administrative assistants. We need professionals to work with social media, HR, and IT. Remind your friends and family who are looking for their dream job to consider Mississippi Public Broadcasting. Check out the careers link from mpbonline.org.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino on MPB Think Radio. To join the show, email thesitdown@mpbonline.org or send us a voice note with the Talk to Us feature inside the MPB Public Media app. This is MPB Think Radio.
Welcome back to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. First episode talking with Governor Tate Reeves. We've talked a little bit about some of what's happening around economic development in the state, some of the advantages that come from an education system that shows sign of improvement. Talk a little bit about what the legislature has done in terms of investment in education. When we talk about the dividends that are getting paid, what is the investment? What has that been?
Yeah, so we've seen a significant increase in public education dollars. I will tell you that the vast majority of the improvements in education have not been, in my opinion, related to dollars. But as a conservative, I believe that you reward success. And we have been able to enact the largest teacher pay raise in state history in the last couple of years. Almost $5,000 per teacher, in addition to the teacher pay raise we had in the first or second year of my term. And we're rewarding success because we have had massive success. And I think that's something that we should all be proud of. And you know, I feel like last year during the campaign, we spent a lot of resources talking about the improvements that have been made in public education. And so I really... But we've got to continue to, again, tell our story, because if we don't tell it, people with an agenda tell a story and they don't always tell the whole truth. And that's people on both sides of the aisle. Otherwise, educated people questioning, for instance, the Mississippi Miracle. Look, the Mississippi Miracle is real. Now, I don't think it was a miracle, but it's real. And it's real because we enacted conservative policies and conservative reforms in 2012 and 2013 that has completely changed the trajectory of public education in the state of Mississippi. I'm proud of that fact. I think we should all be proud of it, and we should be proud of our teachers. Now, the fact is that we are seeing significant improvements basically across the board. And just because an individual may have another agenda and want to do additional policy reforms doesn't mean that the reforms that we've already enacted haven't worked and that the investments haven't worked.
It strikes me on the Mississippi Miracle, and maybe this just echoes your point, that there's dishonesty on both sides of the political spectrum at times, which basically tries to discount the fact that for Caucasian students in Mississippi, we went from dead last to 21st or something like that. For African American students, an even bigger gain, from close to dead last to 4th or 5th in the country on NAEP reading scores, which is sort of the gold standard of standardized testing. So those things are things to be celebrated, and there are people that want to discount that for different reasons. Some people want to discount it because they don't want anybody to think Mississippi is actually improving. And then there are some other people who I think they want to say, let's push further. And we should be able to push further while also recognizing that there have been positive things that are happening in the state.
No question. And I mean, I think that there are those on one side of the political spectrum who, again, don't want to give any credit to the conservative reforms that have been enacted. And there are, as you have mentioned, there are those that want to enact more conservative reforms that, for whatever reason, can't bring themselves to really doing the smart thing, which is saying the reason we've moved from 50th to 30th in the Annie Casey Foundation results is because of the conservative reforms that we've enacted. We've enacted, for instance, certain areas of school choice for some kids. I'm for doing more of that, but I think we should recognize that the public charter schools that are in existence, creating that competition in certain D and F school districts has allowed for every school in those districts to recognize the importance of improved results, and we ought to celebrate the successes that we've had, not try to belittle them. In my opinion. And so, and look, we have a saying in the governor's office, it's really hard to take politics out of politics. And in Mississippi, the political game is a blood sport. We know that. And look, I've been around a long time. The fact is that there are some people that just simply don't want to acknowledge that we've had tremendous successes, because after all, they've been voting against me for 20 years. But it isn't about me. It's about those kids. It's about those kids. And what you mentioned earlier in terms of the successes of all kids in virtually all of our districts, and specifically our African-American students, who literally 10 years ago were ranked 45th amongst their peers in the other 49 in all 50 states, and they were ranked 5th best in America last year in 4th grade reading. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it goes back to the idea that we should be able to recognize when we're doing positive things as a state. I think, the conversation around school choice is an interesting conversation. You see Louisiana has just enacted a universal school choice program. Arkansas, a couple of years ago, enacted a universal school choice program. Alabama's got something close to that. I think Tennessee and Bill Lee are pushing for that. When we look at Mississippi, do you think the time is ripe for something like what we've seen in those surrounding states, where parents would have more ability to decide the right setting for their kids?
I believe that we need to empower parents. I believe that if you empower parents to give them an opportunity, that over long periods of time, they will make good decisions. We've got to work on our accountability model. I think that's incredibly important, because we just had a system and an accountability model that needs to be revised. The fact is, you look at what happened in 2021 in the pandemic and the declining scores that came from that, and now our growth rates over the last 3 years have been phenomenal when you look at it. But the reality is we need to have that conversation around the accountability model, and I think we will. But yes, I think that more school choice is good. More options for parents is good. And I've been a leading proponent of more school choice since I began as lieutenant governor in 2012, and we'll continue to push for more options for parents.
So we're up against a break in a minute here, but I did want to mention, and we can talk a little bit more about this on the other side, there's been a lot of conversation around healthcare in Mississippi, particularly around the concept of Medicaid expansion, a lot of real debate around that concept. You have been against the idea of expanding Medicaid. One of the arguments that's been made along the way is that we need to expand Medicaid in order to be able to ensure that hospitals remain solvent, that the hospital in my community is still able to serve patients. I know that you take a different look at that based on some changes that you guys made with CMS. Just briefly, if you can, give us a sense of what that change was and what the impact has been.
Yeah, so we worked with a large number of hospitals in the state to have an enhanced MHAP contribution to hospitals, which basically, in layman's terms, we now reimburse hospitals for the services they provide at a reasonable rate. And CMS agreed with that. We've pumped $700 million into hospitals throughout the state. And that's annually. That's every single year. And if you talk to hospital administrators that will tell you the truth, they'll tell you it's the single biggest thing that's ever happened for the financial viability of hospitals in the state of Mississippi, and it's continuing to work. And quite frankly, I would submit to you that given the current state of play with almost 200,000 people own private insurance in the exchange between 100 and 138% of the poverty level, if we actually expanded Medicaid in Mississippi, it would be worse financially for those hospitals, and that's the disingenuous position that some people take. They don't recognize that.
Let's dig into that more after the break. You're listening to Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're talking with Governor Tate Reeves. We'll be right back.
Connect with the people looking to connect with you. Become an underwriter with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. For more information, go to mpbonline.org/more/underwriting.
Wednesdays on MPB Think Radio help solve your problems. The original Southern Remedy covers all types of medical issues that affect your life at 11 a.m. If you can't stay with us for the rest of the morning, find our podcasts. They're on the MPB Public Radio app and on the MPB Think Radio YouTube channel.
Our local shows continue after the sit down with Russ Latino. Continue to listen to MPB Think Radio.
I'm Scott Tong. In a new film, Japanese journalist Shiori Ito tells her story of being raped by a fellow journalist. She takes on powerful politicians in an antiquated rape law.
To prove rape, the survivor have to prove that he or she has been threatened or violated, and it's extremely difficult.
Next time, Here and Now.
Today at noon on MPB Think Radio. From pre-K to high school, Mississippi Public Broadcasting's Education Department enriches student learning. Learn more at mpbonline.org.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino on MPB Think Radio. To join the show, email thesitdown@mpbonline.org or send us a voice note with the Talk to Us feature inside the MPB Public Media app. This is MPB Think Radio.
Welcome back to the Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're having a good conversation today with Governor Tate Reeves. Governor, thanks for being with us today. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about Medicaid expansion, and you mentioned something that's a little wonky for a lot of people. Because it is wonky, not because of the way you said it. The Medicaid expansion, when we talk about it, there are really two populations of people. There are people who are able-bodied adults that currently aren't eligible that make between essentially what is about 20% of the federal poverty level and 99% of the federal poverty level. That's one group. And then there's another group of people that make between 100% and 138% of the federal poverty level. And those folks are currently eligible for an insurance plan, a private insurance plan on the Affordable Care Act exchange. And so what you were referencing was the idea is essentially taking people who already have private insurance off of private insurance and moving them to Medicaid. Did I summarize that right?
That is correct. And in both of those groups, we're talking about able-bodied adults. And by able-bodied adults, we mean adults that are between the ages of 18 and 65 that could work, that either are underemployed or are not earning up to a level greater than 138% of the poverty level. So we're talking about able-bodied adults. And so the thing that I try to explain to people, in this business, you've got your philosophical beliefs and then you got a practical side of things. And sometimes while you may be philosophically opposed to something, the practical side of it is just so overwhelming that you maybe have to do something that maybe you're philosophically not against. I'll give you an example of that. Capitol Police, for instance. I philosophically do not believe that the state should be operating a police force inside one city in our state. But because of law and order is so critically important and the future of our capital city is so critically important, we have made the decision with my support to have a Capitol Police Force. And I will tell you, I think it has changed the trajectory and the direction of the state of Mississippi that we've been willing to do that. Well, when you look at Medicaid expansion, I'm philosophically opposed to it because I believe when you're talking about able-bodied adults, while you may think you're doing something good by giving someone a government benefit, typically the cycle of poverty is not broken by giving someone government benefits. So philosophically, I'm opposed to it. But on the practical side, there is an argument, one that I believe is clear, that for those individuals between 100 and 138% of the poverty level that are currently have private insurance, the reimbursement rates to the providers are greater than the reimbursement rates would be if they were switched to Medicaid. And that's a segment of the population that is almost 200,000 Mississippians today. And so it's worse for the providers. In other words, it's worse for the hospitals if they're being reimbursed at Medicaid rates rather than being reimbursed at rates that are paid by private insurance. It makes absolutely no sense to me, and I think that the numbers are very clear and bear that out. And I've never heard an argument from anyone to the contrary. And so from both a philosophical standpoint and a practical standpoint, Medicaid expansion in Mississippi is a bad idea for our providers. It's a bad idea for those individuals, and I think the case is very, very clear.
On those ACA plans, the federal government pays 100% of the premium, most of the deductible. I think I saw Kaiser Family Foundation said it was about a $90 a year deductible for one of those plans. And then all of those plans have $0 copays for primary care visits, generics. So right now, the federal government is essentially picking up 100% of that tab.
Through subsidies.
Right.
That's
As
correct.
taxpayers are picking up 100% of the tab. If the state were to take on that population of 100 to 138%, the state would be taking on 10% of the tab, where the federal government's already paying 100%.
That is correct. And so you have 200,000 able-bodied adults that currently the state is paying zero for, that the feds are paying through subsidies 100% of the cost. If you took those 200,000 and moved them to the Medicaid program, that would then become a 90-10 split under existing law. And what would end up happening is Mississippi would have about 650,000 Mississippians on Medicaid with a 74-26 split. We'd have an additional 200,000-ish, maybe up to 300 or 400 if you went below, if you included those below the 100% of the poverty level, where we were paying somewhere between 10 and 24%. So for those 200,000 between 100 and 138% of the poverty level, and I'm sorry, I know this is very deep in the weeds, but I want you to know that we have looked at these numbers. This is not just I'm against this just for philosophical reasons. I'm against it because practically it doesn't make sense. It's because the feds are paying 100% of the cost there. Mississippi would charge Mississippi taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars to make the move, and the reimbursement rates for the hospitals will be worse. It is truly a lose-lose-lose proposition.
So obviously that's a fight that's not going away. There are people in the legislature that are really committed to pushing that idea. And obviously there are also people in the public that have kind of been sold on the idea of, hey, this increases access to care. Setting that sort of fight aside, where there's maybe difference of thought within the party that you represent, the Republican Party, what are the big opportunities for coalescence? When you look at over the next 3 years, what do you think the legislature and your office would accomplish that would have the biggest impact in Mississippi?
Well, I think where there is a real opportunity for us as a state in terms of truly improving access of care, it is in the realm of education. And in the last 2 months, I've done 2 events that highlight that. Number one, I did an event at South Central Hospital in Laurel in Jones County, where they were announcing 12 medical residencies for either internal care, internal medicine docs, or primary care docs. They're going to do 12 a year in each of the next 3 years in each of those 2 fields. So that's 72 residency programs over the next 4 to 5 years. That means 72 docs that are graduating from med school that are going to do their residency right there in rural Mississippi. And the statistics show that the vast majority of physicians practice medicine within a 50-mile radius, not of where they went to med school, but within a 50-mile radius of where they do their residency program. So that's 72 doctors over the next 5 years that we have a realistic chance of keeping. The second event I did was just earlier this week that over in Meridian, where Mississippi State University is creating a pathway for for significant numbers of healthcare professionals, specifically in the physician assistance program and others. They have a very large commitment and investment there by the Rally Foundation, by the state, by the feds, where it's a partnership where they're going to produce hundreds of additional healthcare professionals. To improve access to care in our state, we need more people working in the healthcare space. And that's going to drive access to care improvements far more than an insurance policy and how these providers are compensated. And so that's what we've really been working on. We need more residency programs at UMMC in Jackson, but we also need more residency programs in other parts of the state, and that's something that we're beginning to really coalesce around as a path forward.
So we've got a couple minutes left. I want to wrap up with something we're going to try and do. Are you familiar with the Actor Studio, Inside the Actor Studio? The guy that asked the 5 questions. I want to do a Mississippi version of 5 questions with our guests. So we'll do lightning round. Sweet tea or unsweet?
Sweet.
Of course. You're driving down the interstate. You're jamming out to some music. You look down. You're going 95 miles an hour. What are you listening to?
Well, I would never speed, but if I were speeding, I would be listening to George Strait. I'm a country music guy.
Cornbread or biscuits?
Both.
All right. What are you reading right now?
I'm actually reading an autobiography of a former president right now.
Care to name the president?
I do not.
All right. Interesting. What's one hidden gem in Mississippi that people should check out?
I'm going to say the Mississippi Arts Entertainment Experience in downtown Meridian. I was just there a couple of days ago, and downtown Meridian is doing phenomenally well. You've seen a lot of investment returning there, and I think those downtown areas are key to growing rural Mississippi.
Thank you, Governor Reeves. You've been listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino, production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting Think Radio, funded by the generous contributions of listeners like you. Today's show was produced by Java Chapman with live stream production by Henry Lena and Joseph Hall. For my special guest, Tate Reeves, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned to The Southern Remedy at 11 a.m. and join us next Wednesday for another episode of The Sit Down, heard on MPB Think Radio.
This is MPB Think Radio. Mississippi is our mission.
This forecast is under